What is up, guys? Well, if you've not been following me over the past couple of weeks, I was in Austin, Texas, attending the Fantastic Fest 2022. It was my first in-person film festival, and it was an absolute blast. It was my first time experiencing an Alamo Draft House, which might just be my new favorite theater chain. It was just a really cool experience, getting able to see all of these really cool genre flicks from the horror genre, the thriller genre, the action genre before anybody else, with a whole bunch of movie fanatics like myself, getting to meet Chris Stuckman, getting to see a lot of directors and writers that I admire in person, having a couple of you guys come up to me and Sean and say that you loved our channels and kind of talking about movies with us for a little bit in between films. All of that was just such a very cool experience that is one of the highlights of not only the past year, but just the entire time that I have been on YouTube. And also a gigantic thanks to the awesome Chandler family. My buddy Sean has attended this festival a couple of times, has told me about it, told me that it was probably more along the lines of a festival that I would enjoy, and he was absolutely right. So huge thanks to them for having me stay at their house for well over a week. A gigantic thank to Sean's wife, Jennifer, for helping me get home early. I had to come back home a day before planned because of Hurricane Ian. Wanted to be home with my family just in case it hit, and thank God it didn't. But it was just one of the best experiences of my life, being able to check out Fantastic Fest and experience all these awesome movies. Now, over the 7 days of the festival that I was able to attend, I saw 14 films. Uncle Sean's gonna be dropping a video just like this, hopefully around the same time, and he actually got to see 2 more films than me, so be sure to check out his channel. I'll have the link down below to his video and see how his ranking is different from mine, as well as the 2 additional films that he was able to check out. And with all that being said, guys, let's get into it, starting off at number 14. And this is honestly the only film in the entire festival that I saw that I would say was a bad movie. And it's Birdemic 3 Sea Eagle. Now, I am somebody where I have never heard of the Birdemic franchise in my entire life. Sean told me about this the very first day that I landed in Austin and said, hey, I don't know, a lot of these movies, I'm not really sure what they are, but on this day, we've got to see this, because me and my friend watched the first 2 back to back, and unfortunately, we've got to complete this legacy with checking out the 3rd film. For those of you that don't know what Birdemic is, it's essentially a global warming version of like The Room, basically. I don't know a whole lot of the history. It's a movie that was made and is known as one of the worst films of all time, and somehow there was 2 more. And I can tell you that, judging based off of the 3rd film, I don't think I would enjoy the first 2 any more than I enjoyed the 3rd one, because this was just a wow.
We better fix global warming, else the human race will end up like this whale skeleton.
It's one of those movies that is so terrible that you really struggle to figure out whether or not the filmmakers are intentionally making it terrible or just are really unaware of the disaster piece that they are making. And it doesn't help when you have a Q&A after the film and all the actors and the director and everybody get up there and they do it dead serious, as if they just made this masterpiece of romantic thrillers within the global warming climate. It was a very strange experience.
It's fall.
The effects on the birds, it's basically something that you pull off of like a clip art, and you could do, I could literally do it better right now. Like, I don't say that often. I'm not trying to be like a conceited dick, but I could make a better Birdemic movie in my room right here using my green screen. It's that bad. When you walk into a screening and the first thing they do is sit a complimentary shot of tequila in front of you before the film you're about to watch, you know you are in for some shit. Now moving on to the other 13 films on this list, all of which I would say I enjoyed on some level, but 13 is the only one prior to Birdemic that me and Sean seemed to agree just didn't quite work for us. And that was Kids vs. Aliens. This is from the filmmaker who brought you Hobo with a Shotgun a number of years ago. And this is essentially kind of a grindhousey play on the Stranger Things setup. You've got these group of young kids that do all of these little home Super 8 films where they're fighting aliens and monsters, and actual aliens descend on their town and chaos ensues. And it sounded like a really fun premise, but somewhere along the way, they just did not grab me with what they were doing to execute this concept. There is very intentionally cheap production value here, like the alien suits look like things you could probably go pick up at Spirit Halloween, and there's times where going intentionally cheap can be kind of funny and charming. This one, it kind of felt like it just didn't fit in the movie for me and just took me out of it. There's a central villain in this that is a bully to these kids that just goes so over the top with his level of psycho and level of just like sociopath that it really took me out of the movie, to where you've got this guy who is just so despicable the entire film, to the point where he's actually doing things in the third act that just kind of ruined the entire enjoyment of the concept. And unfortunately, it was a film, without saying too much, that doesn't necessarily wrap up in the most satisfying way, in hopes that they're going to be able to continue things on in the future. And so I enjoyed it well enough. It was a fun movie to watch that I didn't particularly enjoy, but it just didn't come together for me. Number 12 is going to be Blood Relatives. Now, this is a movie that I was intrigued on specifically because it said vampires. It's essentially, you got a vampire who finds out that he's got a daughter who also is a vampire, and it's like a dad and daughter kind of a family dramedy on the road. And it's not as interesting as the concept makes it sound, unfortunately. This is the one movie of the festival that I would say was just kind of the most dull, unfortunately. You have the vampire side of things and you have the comedy side of things, and both of those aspects of this movie are so mild that it just failed to really have any kind of an impact. Like, you've got the vampire stuff and there's not really any carnage. The only kills you see are kind of the aftermath, and they're not really all that gory or all that interesting for us horror fans, in my opinion. And the comedy is very, almost borderline PG level, like dad joke level of humor. And so there's some people that are really going to enjoy that. I've seen some people that had early reactions coming out on Twitter that were calling this generation's near dark. I would not say that in any way, shape, or form, but it's worth checking out if you're a vampire fan. To me, I just wish it had more punch to it. Number 11 is a Korean film called Hunt. Now, I'm going to say this right now. Please do not take my opinion on this movie seriously whatsoever, because I had a very skewed experience with this. This movie should be higher on this list. This is just where I have to put it. This is a very fast-paced, convoluted, dense political thriller with a lot of great action sequences. That's the one thing that I can seriously praise about this, is the shooting and the fight sequences are shot and executed very well, and all the acting was done really well. It had a bit of a Departed vibe to it to me, which is very appealing, one of my favorite films of all time. Unfortunately for me, about 20 minutes into this movie, I got the worst headache that I have had probably all year, and I had to watch about a third of this film like kind of wincing and kind of like holding my head and looking away from the screen a little bit, which is hard enough to watch a political thriller that's as dense and convoluted as this, but when it's in subtitles, you're fucked. And so by the end of the film, I gathered what was going on. I could tell, I could put the pieces together, but I actually had to ask Sean in the lobby after the movie, like, all right, dude, explain things to me. Did I get this right? Was this what was going on? Because I just couldn't watch the film in the way that it deserved to. So unfortunately, it's this low on the list just because of my experience. But if you're interested in this, I'm sure it would land much higher on yours. I'm sure it's going to be much higher on Sean's. Number 10 was the last film that I watched at the festival, and that is VHS 99. Now, I still have not seen VHS 94, I believe it is. That's the one that I've heard so much praise for, and I will check that out before long. But I've had seen the first VHS film, of which I loved the very first segment, directed by David Bruckner, and he's got a film on this list that's much higher. The rest of that movie didn't really work for me. And this was a very mixed bag. Unfortunately, I'm not really big into found footage films. The whole shaky cam thing really is not appealing to me. Horror anthologies, extreme hit or miss with me. You get films like Trick or Treat, that's like that rare gem that it all kind of comes together in this flowing narrative that I love. And most of the horror anthologies that I've seen, even the ones that people really adore, just don't really come together. VHS 99, I think, had one segment in it that I would call one of the greatest horror shorts that I've ever seen. It's kind of a horror comedy take on like the old Nickelodeon game shows like Legends of the Hidden Temple and Guts that I thought was fucking hilarious. My whole theater thought it was hilarious. Everybody was erupting into laughter that entire time. That segment was gold. There was two more that I did enjoy, one regarding kind of claustrophobia and being buried alive, the other one regarding spying on a hot neighbor. And then the book ending segments I thought were just terrible. The first segment, the characters that they were focusing on, I thought were some of the most obnoxiously annoying, insufferable characters that I've seen in a film all year, and it really set the tone in a bad way for this film to where I'm going, what the fuck is this? This sucks. Should we leave? And so by the end of it, I dug it enough. I had a decent enough time with it. I would recommend it to people that love the VHS franchise or if you love horror anthologies, but it certainly was not a movie that makes me more inclined to check out all the other VHS films that I have yet to see. Number 9 is going to be Sick, of which I dropped a full review for yesterday, and Sick is the newest Kevin Williamson written slasher film. It's also directed by John Hyams, who did a movie called Alone a couple of years ago, which I have not seen, but seems to be a movie a lot of people have praised that have seen it. And this is a COVID pandemic slasher. You got these characters that are going into quarantine, they're locking themselves up in this little off-the-grid cabin, and some slasher killer stuff happens. And to me, it was a movie that when it was focusing on the meta Kevin Williamson style commentary of COVID was very interesting and surprisingly entertaining for as sick of talking and hearing about COVID as I am. But everything else about the movie, the entire middle 45 minutes to an hour where it's just slasher stuff, was pretty generic. It was well directed, it was well executed, there's some really good intense action in the chase sequences, but not a very high body count, not the most interesting killer in the world as far as the design and everything. And so there's elements to this movie that I really appreciated. I just didn't get enough of it. And so by the end, this ended up being one of the more frustrating movies for me, to where I really wanted to like it. I really wanted to walk out and be able to say, guys, Kevin Williamson did it again. But it seems like, for whatever reason, they took a half measure when they should have went all in. Number 8 is going to be Marvel Studios' Werewolf by Night. Now, really quick before I talk about this, I have to share a story. Now, Werewolf by Night was one of the most hilarious experiences that I had in this entire festival, because the way that it works is you have this app, this Fantastic Fest app, and every single day at 10 a.m. sharp, they release all of the tickets for the films for the next day. And you have to go in there and select the times and select the movies that you want to see. And it is a bit of a race for the higher profile movies, because if you fuck around and wait, you will miss out on that film. It will go sold out. And there are 2 secret screenings, from what I understand, at every single Fantastic Fest, to where you don't know what it is until you get your ticket, walk into the theater, sit down, and they tell you what you're about to watch. And this thing was hyped up all to hell for the first 4 days of this festival, to where everybody was giving all this speculation on what it could be. Rian Johnson was walking around Fantastic Fest. They're like, maybe it's Glass Onion, the Knives Out sequel. We had heard rumblings about Hellraiser. Halloween 2018 apparently premiered at Fantastic Fest in 2018, so people were whispering about maybe they're going to show Halloween Ends. And so my head's just getting inflated with all this awesome idea of what this movie could be, this first secret screening. And unfortunately, my alarm on my phone got confused because I went backwards an hour from Georgia time to Texas time, and I overslept by about 15 minutes the day that I was supposed to buy tickets for this secret screening. And when I woke up, every theater was sold out. And I spent over a day literally sick to my stomach, just thinking about, oh great, I fucked up and now it's going to be the best thing ever. It's going to be Halloween Ends and fucking Jamie Lee Curtis is probably going to be there, and I'm going to be kicking myself in the ass for the rest of my life because I overslept by 15 minutes. I was miserable. I was so pissed off, where I could barely even enjoy that day's slate of films. I was so nervous. And I was communicating with one of the press reps over email, basically begging, hey man, something happened. I really want to see this screen. Is there anything that can be done? And I was told, okay, show up the day of the screening. We'll see what we can do. And so all the way up to a couple hours before this screening, I'm sick to my stomach with nerves. I walk up to the press table the day of the secret screening, and they hand me a ticket and say, hey, we got you, here you go. And so I'm relieved as hell in that moment. And then I look down, and the ticket that they gave me is for Theater 4, which is where all of the actual talent, the entire festival, attended their screenings. So the directors, the cast, the producers, anybody that was there to premiere that film, they were always in Theater 4, which was always sold out before us press people were able to access our tickets. And so now I'm looking at it, and me and Sean are looking, and I'm like, holy shit! Oversleeping might have been the best thing ever. Now I'm going to be able to walk in and see this movie in theater 4, and Jamie Lee Curtis might walk up and sit 2 rows in front of me. Holy shit. So now I'm sick to my stomach with nerves for the opposite reason, because I'm so excited about what this could be. You walk in to this secret screening, and I'm pumped, I'm excited, I'm shaking with nerves, like, oh my God, what's this going to be? Could it actually happen? I sit down, I go to order my food, and the woman who is the waitress goes, hey, this movie's only an hour long. You still want to order food?
You excited?
You know the hour long. So this film is only going to be an hour long?
It's been really hard to keep this secret. It's just, I know a lot of people will be moving around.
And my hopes and dreams just crushed, because I knew it had to be something that was like a Disney Plus thing. And lo and behold, when it came out, Werewolf by Night, I'm like, fuck! In hindsight, it's a cool thing to see. I'm one of a select few people that are only people on Earth that are going to be able to watch Werewolf by Night on the big screen. It was very well done. But my God, that was the worst possible answer to what that secret screening could have been for all of the emotional buildup that I had to it. So I immediately tweeted out like, oh my God, that was crushing disappointment. And so in hindsight, it's one of the funniest stories I can tell from Fantastic Fest, because guys, I was literally sick, like visibly angry and sick for like a day about what I possibly could have screwed myself out of. Now, talking specifically about Werewolf by Night. So this is a new Marvel Studios special presentation thing that they're playing around with, to where it's not a TV series, it's not a full-length film. This was like a 50-minute thing. I hesitate to call it a short, but I hesitate to call it a full-length film too. So that was the biggest issue for me, was that as cool as this was, as much as it really harkened back to classic horror, classic monster movies, did it very well. The lighting especially was really cool and impressive during like the creature effects, and you just see it in shadows. And it was something very interesting and different for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I just don't know what to do with this. Like a 50-minute thing. You watch it, you get to the end, and you go, well, what the fuck? I want more. And that's a compliment, I guess. I mean, that's the best negative you could possibly hear, is that it's not enough. But it just, again, I'm totally confused and baffled by what Marvel's been doing with their Disney Plus stuff. If you guys haven't followed me, I have not really been a big fan of any of the Disney Plus shows. Every single one of them seem to have the same issues, to where it feels like it should be a full series or it should be a movie, and it's this weird compromise. And then this is just on another level of like, well, what is this? This should be a movie or a full series, and it's just 50 minutes. It's a total dick tease. It's like, hey guys, isn't this cool? Yeah, it is. Where the fuck's the rest of it? This was also directed by Michael Giacchino, by the way, who is a very popular composer, has been doing work for a long time. He did the Batman score earlier this year that everybody loved. And so the other like twisting the knife is that he wasn't even there in attendance. They had to do a Zoom call. So the one time I got to be in theater 4 and might have seen the talent, might have been able to watch it with the director and the cast, they weren't even there. So life's funny. Number 7 is going to be Project Wolf Hunter. This is the other foreign film, also Korean, that I saw. And we saw them back to back, Hunt to this. And luckily my headache dissipated quite a bit over the hour-plus wait that we had in the lobby. It was still lingering a little bit, but I was able to follow Project Wolf Hunter so much more than I was Hunt. And all we knew about this was that the little description said, Korean Con Air on a boat. And that made me interested, and that really perked up Sean. So we checked this thing out, and this was a really wild, fun movie. If you just like absolute zany, ridiculous carnage, I highly recommend checking this thing out. I had a pretty good time with it. It starts off for the first hour exactly as that, Con Air on a boat, where you get these set of criminals, and they're being transferred on this big tanker ship, and they break out, take over the ship, and then the last half of the movie just goes fucking insane, to where there's these genetically modified superhuman mutant things on the ship that get out, and it just becomes an absolute bloodbath. And it's that Korean gore, to where all the blood just sprays, even if you just get like a little paper cut, it just... And this thing just went fucking nuts for the rest of the film, and it was very fun. It's a total dumb, shut your brain off and just enjoy it ridiculous movie, but I tend to have more fun with those than the thought-provoking movies, depending on my mood. And I was certainly in the mood for something like that after the experience I had with Hunt. So I really enjoyed Project Wolf Hunter. If you can take watching foreign films, this is a very easy one to follow because it's mostly about the carnage on screen, not all the espionage down that you have to read every 5 seconds. So definitely check that one out. Number 6 is going to be the Banshees of Inisherin. This is the newest film by Martin McDonagh. That's the guy that got In Bruges. Sorry, was having a brain fart. In Bruges, Seven Psychopaths, the 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. And I love all 3 of those films, so I was very excited to check this thing out. And I will say this is a very well-made film that's certainly going to get some Oscar love. Very good performances, beautifully shot. Like the pieces of Ireland that it shows are just gorgeous. But it's my least favorite of McDonagh's films that I've seen thus far. This is much more of a quiet, simple movie. It's essentially about these 2 guys that are friends, Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, bit of a reunion from In Bruges. And the movie starts off and Brendan Gleeson decides he doesn't want to be friends with Colin Farrell anymore and doesn't give him an explanation, acknowledges the fact that nothing has happened, he hasn't done anything to him, but he just doesn't want to be friends anymore. And so the entire movie is essentially about this slowly escalating Cold War between these 2 characters to where Brendan Gleeson escalates how serious he is about not wanting to be friends with Colin Farrell, while Colin Farrell escalates how serious he is about wanting an explanation and wanting a second chance or wanting that friendship to continue. And so it goes to some pretty crazy places with how far Brendan Gleeson takes it. And there's a good bit of humor, of that black comedy flavor that McDonagh brings to pretty much all of his films. Carrie Conlon especially is really good in this. You'll recognize her from, I always think of Unleashed, but also she's played Mike's daughter-in-law in Better Call Saul. You'll recognize her, but she does very good in this. But it's just a movie that I can't really ever see myself rewatching again. As much as I love the dark black comedy take and some of the things, that the sense of humor that Martin McDonagh brings to his films, this is the one that impacted me the least. And so I would recommend it if you're a fan of McDonagh, but just know what movie you're walking into because it's a very slow burn, quiet movie that is not nearly as flashy as his previous films. Number 5 is going to be Smile, one of the bigger surprises at this festival, because when I first saw the trailer to this, I thought this was going to be one of the most generic horror films that I would see all year. It was like the visual gag of Truth or Dare with the premise of It Follows and The Ring. And that's exactly what it ended up being, but it was like the best possible version of that. It's a movie that you look at and you kind of understand exactly the movie that you're walking into. There are some surprises in store, but for the most part, it's exactly what's advertised. But it's a really well done version of that. It's a lot creepier, it's a lot more sinister, it's a lot more unnerving than that trailer gave it credit for. The trailer made it seem like it was going to be very surface value with its scares. And the central performance of Sosie Bacon, which I did not realize, even though she has that last name, is the daughter of Kevin Bacon and Kira Sedgwick, who apparently was at the festival the very first night, but they purposefully stayed out of the public eye and let their daughter kind of have the spotlight, which was awesome. But that would have been fucking cool if I could have got a picture with Kevin Bacon and Kira Sedgwick. Nonetheless, she's great in this. Even the supporting characters like Cal Penn, really well done. Kyle Gallner, a guy that I didn't love early on in his career, but has certainly done a lot better here recently with what I've seen him in. It's a horror flick that I think is very solid. I think that if the trailer intrigued you, you probably will be surprised with how good the movie actually is. If the trailer does not interest you whatsoever, maybe give it a chance, but it's a really good version of a movie that's pretty familiar for horror fans. Number 4 is the new Hellraiser. This was the second secret screening, and at this point, after my experience with the first secret screening, I put my expectations way down low and just walked in saying, okay, this better be something worth seeing after that first one. Does DC have any new shows coming out? And whenever the woman, the presenter, came out and she's like, hey, you know, we had this little deal that we were trying to make with these Serbian filmmakers and they wanted to do these exploitation films, and so we made this deal. And so everybody around me was making jokes like, oh fuck, is this going to be like a Serbian film too? What is this?
It's Serbian movie too.
That's what I was just... As soon as you said Serbian, I'm like, Serbian film too?
And then she goes, well, they weren't able to secure a deal. We're very upset about that, but they did send us a gift. And then she pulled out the box.
I have this gift to show y'all.
What the fuck?
Wow.
We got the new Hellraiser. Director David Brackner is here.
And everybody was like, oh, thank Christ. And so Hellraiser, I was really surprised with. Now, I'm somebody that is only a casual fan of the good Hellraiser movies, of which I would say there are 3, maybe even just 2. And the rest of the franchise, I could pretty much take or leave all of them. I mean, some of them are worse than others, but even the tolerable ones after 4, not really movies I ever need to watch again. So not a franchise that has ever really been big on my radar. It's a franchise that desperately needed a reboot. And so this movie had a lot of hopes and dreams on its shoulders from us horror and Hellraiser fans. And I think they made a damn good Hellraiser movie. I would say that it matches the quality of the first film. For some people, it might even surpass it, just depending on what you want out of a Hellraiser film. But it takes just enough of a different take and a different approach while really harnessing and respecting the elements that made the first couple Hellraiser films horror classics for some of us. And for me, what I loved about this was, to me, it's the first Hellraiser film that really shows the Cenobites and Pinhead as the star of the show. The looming threat of the Cenobites and the thing that we're building up to, this ultimate confrontation and this kind of alluring nature of Pinhead and this lament configuration, like that is the entire plot of the film. And they've always kind of felt like the secondary villains, like this background noise in most of the Hellraiser films. Even the first film, Frank and Julia are the central villains and the Cenobites just come later on. And that's great for that first film, but it's always bugged me that the franchise that arguably has the gnarliest and the coolest looking villain never figured out how to use him. And so I love the fact that they, in my opinion, found a great way to make the Cenobites, the creature designs, and the new Pinhead, played by Jamie Clayton, who does very well as Pinhead, in my opinion, to make them the central figures of this movie. And so I really dug it. I dug the storyline. I think that the practical effects on the creature design especially, but even the gore that we get here, is done very well. It's genuinely creepy and gets under your skin throughout the film. It's well paced. I love the effects that they have as, like, after the box reaches a certain configuration and the Cenobites are coming, like, you'll see the walls start to go away and you'll see, like, the floors drop out. And it looked very convincing. I'm sure a lot of it was practical, but even if it was CGI, it was extremely, extremely well done CGI. And it set this franchise in a spot to where I am excited for what might come in the future, which I have never been able to say for the Hellraiser franchise. So I think if you're a Hellraiser fan, you have a serious treat coming your way on the 7th on Hulu. And even if you're somebody that has never really dug the Hellraiser movies, I think this movie might win some of you over. So I'm really glad I got to check this thing out and among the very few people to ever be able to see this on the big screen, because it was awesome. Number 3 is going to be Bones and All. This is another film that me and Sean pretty much walked into blind. All I knew about it was that Timothée Chalamet was in it and Luca Guadagnino. I might have fucked up the pronunciation of that name, but the guy that directed the Suspiria remake directed this. And so I was intrigued enough to check this out. And so I had no idea that this film was a cannibal romance film. And so within the first 5 minutes, when you see a finger get chewed off, I was like, oh shit, what the fuck is this? And this movie was so damn good. Like, it really does balance the romance with the horror and the gore. So I think that it's a movie that might be one of those kind of cross-genre films that's going to appeal to a wide array of people, but it just tells the story of these two people that are, cannibalism is kind of like this, it's not really like a disease, but it's a condition that certain people in the world have to where they have a need to feed. That's the only way, it's kind of like vampirism. The only way that they can suppress it is by doing it. And so you got these two people that are out on the road trying to navigate life in a bit of a coming-of-age way, while navigating their cannibalism. And so I think that the central romance of the main two characters and the performances of both of them were awesome, but Mark Rylance absolutely steals the show. He's got a small part in the film that he shows up throughout it, and he is just fucking incredible in this. I think that the body horror in this is gnarly as hell. Definitely matches up with what we saw in the third act of Suspiria. and it just tells a really good story. Like, even if there was no horror, this would just be a really great romance film that is just driven by all these central performances. So this was one of the biggest surprises of the festival for me, and it's supposed to be coming out later on this year. So if you're somebody that digs all of the different things that I've just described this film as, and you want to see what Luca Guadagnino can do next, this I thought was even better than Suspiria, and I like that movie quite a bit. So bones and all, definitely check this one out. Coming in at number 2, Terrifier 2, and I am as surprised as you because I really am not the biggest fan of the first film. I think it's fine. I think that Art the Clown is an interesting design. I think that some of the practical gore was well done. There's aspects to that movie that I can kind of dig and get into, but I just never really thought that it was this instant classic that a lot of people made it out to be. I still don't. And so when I walked into Terrifier 2, I was really worried about what this was going to be because it was 2 hours and 20 minutes long. And I just can't think of a 2 hour and 20 minute slasher that sounds appealing to me, let alone a Terrifier movie. And so we sat down. It was in the same theater as Damien Leone and David Howard Thornton and all the people that starred in the film and worked on the film. And so it was a cool experience just being able to see it in the big screen with the cast and the crew and a whole bunch of fans that were there at a midnight screening of Terrifier 2 to just see carnage. So there's certainly going to be an amount of my enjoyment of this film that can be attributed to my experience seeing it. Maybe it won't hold up on my second watch, time will tell. But I had such a great fucking time with this movie that I was shocked. I was shocked how much fun I had. This is everything about that first film, but more, in excess. You have way more gore, way more kills, way more Art the Clown, significantly more story and characters, which is the saving grace, because that's what I was really missing from that first film. And even like the new final girl, the nemesis of Art the Clown that they bring in here, Sienna is the name of the character. She is so over the top and like fantastical with like the design of her and where things go that it just totally matches up with the excess of the rest of this film and works. There's a lot of really cool horror winks and nods that I picked up on throughout the movie. The kills are extreme as fuck. I mean, there's one that feels like it goes on for like 10 minutes and just keeps going back to it to where I could see out the corner of my eye, like in my peripheral, Sean was like, oh, it's still going. Did it need to be 2 hours and 20 minutes? No, I don't think so. There was plenty of spots I could see where they could have cut it, especially in the third act, but it's kind of a Zack Snyder's Justice League situation to where I believe a good bit of this movie was crowdfunded. It was made for the very hungry fan base of the first Terrifier, and so they just decided, you know what, fuck it, let's just put it all in. Let's just go balls out and make this gigantic, ridiculous, over-the-top 2 hour and 20 minute splatterfest. And I had a fucking great time with it. There's going to be people that aren't going to like it. It's not everybody's cup of tea. But for me, as somebody that is fairly critical of the first film, this one fixed most of my issues and just had an absolute blast with how hilarious and awkward and just all the situational and physical humor of Art the Clown and how over the top and ridiculous the carnage is. It's excess to the point of just being fun. And it's going to be one of the cooler movie theater experiences that I'm going to be able to look back on in my life. And so Terrifier 2, absolutely a fan, and I want to see what they can do with Terrifier 3. But number 1 for me is a movie that I never heard of and was not on my radar at all, which is kind of the best part of festivals like this, is walking into blind and seeing one of your favorite films of the year. And it was The Menu. This is a movie that apparently had a trailer out there, but I had never heard of it. Sean was like, hey, it's this movie, The Menu, you know, Ralph Fiennes is in it. I know you love cooking, so we'll probably check that. Okay, cool, yeah, sounds fun. And we walked in, and the movie starts off, it's a very satirical comedy on the restaurant industry and foodie culture, and it was enjoyable enough. And then it just takes this hard, dark turn, and I realized very quickly that this is not just a satirical comedy, it's a black comedy, and it's going to go dipping into the horror sphere very soon. And I fucking loved this movie from start to finish. Like, everything about this was just so appealing to me. I don't know if it's going to play as well for people that aren't into food and cooking and everything as I am, but every bit of humor that they went for landed for me. And for somebody that is so starved for good comedy, to where I feel like we've had maybe 5 good comedies in the past 10 years, this just it absolutely filled that void to me. Ralph Fiennes is so awesome as this sinister, deranged chef, to where he is so charming and alluring and just commanding of a presence, but also so terrifying that he just glues your eyes to him every single time that he is speaking on screen. All of the other characters, like you've got Anya Taylor-Joy, who again is somebody that's just picking all these awesome projects, and she is great as kind of your lead protagonist here, the person that you're kind of experiencing the movie through. You've got Nicholas Hoult, that was fucking hilarious in here as kind of the douchebag food snob that just thinks that he knows everything about food because he knows all the words, but doesn't know jack shit about cooking or anything, and so he's a total fake. And I loved how subtle the humor was. Like, this isn't a movie that is in your face and going for raunch or going for these huge, gigantic, like, sight gags or anything like that. As great as those comedies are, the cadence of the comedy in this movie is just so quietly confident and almost monotone, to where it's almost like blink and you'll miss it humor, to where just like the last word that'll come out of Ray Fiennes' mouth will just erupt the entire theater into laughter with just how awkward and how subtle the humor is. There's these little title cards that come up every single time there's a new course of this menu, to where it'll show the food almost like Chef's Table or Iron Chef, and it like does this little circle pan. It shows all the ingredients, and throughout the movie that gets more meta and self-referential, and it's a style of humor that's not going to work for everybody, but I'm telling you, my entire theater was erupting in laughter this entire film, and I have not experienced a movie that was that funny and that effective consistently with its humor in years, in many years. And so I just loved how hilarious and sick and twisted this movie got. And I think that if it was not on your radar, it's coming out in November, absolutely put it on your radar, because for as many enjoyable experiences as I had throughout Fantastic Fest, this was easily the movie that I had the best experience with, and cannot wait to go and see it opening night with us regular folk that don't go to Fantastic festivals, and see how a general audience experiences this movie, because man, I fucking loved it. Well, that's it, guys. That is my ranking of all 14 films I saw at this year's Fantastic Fest 2022. Please check out Uncle Sean's video. The link will be down below, and see how his list is different than mine. And there's also 2 bonus movies in there that I did not get a chance to check out. And if Fantastic Fest was not already on your radar, definitely keep it in mind for next year, because as I said, it was one of the coolest experiences that I've had as a film fan, and I will definitely be having my eyes on attending again next year and for many years to come. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed this, please click over here for a playlist of all of my 2022 new release movie reviews, and I'm also going to put my review of The Menu up here for you to check out, and I've reviewed a couple other films that I just talked about in this ranking as well, so please like and share this video and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.